Bring up your Scribe book outline. Miles, can you go ahead and put the link in there, the forced copy link? It's on the course page. It should be in the email. And then Miles is going to put the link in as well. We're going to start at the top where it says book positioning, number 1, your objectives, and the first question where the little red arrow is. That's what it should look like. First question is, how do you want your book to serve your readers? What will they get out of it? So let me give you an example. This is from a book called The Only Skill That Matters. Jonathan Levy went through the guided author program of Scribe Writer's Room, which is, like I told you guys, or Emily told you guys, we have an extensive coaching program, which you do not have to take. Obviously, all the info is going to be free forever. We're going to talk about the coaching program tomorrow for those of you who want it. But he went through it, and that's the book. So his answers to these questions: I'd like to convince readers they aren't stuck where they are now. They can learn anything fast, which makes sense. The only skill that matters is learning, obviously. And he has a process where people can learn really effectively and quickly. And the second thing I'd like to give them the tools and techniques to actually learn faster. So he only had 2, and those are great. The next one example, this is from The Engagement Ring by Leanne Pond. It's about practical leadership skills for engaging employees. Leanne also went through the guided author program of Scribe Writer's Room. So her answers were to understand why employee engagement is important to an organization's success, learn specific steps leaders can take to engage employees, and to understand the connection between leadership and employee engagement. Makes sense, really straightforward. All right, so what I want you to do right now, let's go ahead and stop. We'll take 2 minutes. I'll time it. And then I want you to write down your answers. What do you want your readers to get? So the next question, imagine it's 2 years after your book's published and we're looking back on the results together. What has the book done for you that's made all the effort worthwhile, right? So leave out the shoulds. I should do this. I'm supposed to want this. That's all bullshit. I don't care. No shame-based language at Scribe. For this question, we only care about what you really want. Deep in your heart, what is the thing you really want? Okay. Now, you can start writing right now if you want. I'm going to go over some realistic book objections. So, book objectives. So raising credibility and authority in your field, right? So these are going to be very similar to what we talked about at the beginning, why you should write a book. Generating new incoming business, personal growth, leaving a legacy, impacting people, raising visibility in the media, getting speaking gigs if we ever associate in person again. Those are all really good sort of things. So let me show you what some of our authors wrote. This is coming back to the Jonathan Levy's book, The Only Skill That Matters. We have built our B2C business in large part by leveraging the free book funnel and the exposure of the book. Yeah, that makes sense. We're doing $1 million a year in corporate and enterprise subscriptions because of the exposure and credibility of the book and the event. Notice how the book is part of a system. He's not like, the book's going to make $1 million a year. He's using a book as part of a funnel system, right? And then we spark research, conversation, debate about education reform, and are working on a few non-for-profit initiatives. All reasonable, all achievable. Now let's look at what Leanne said. Organizations are using my techniques. Okay, good. Business is more successful and profitable. Yep. Several opportunities coming in that I do not have, like speaking or going on podcasts. Clear, simple, straightforward, to the point. I actually like how she's not trying to be too specific. She's kind of open to whatever the book's going to bring, right? Now, do not ask a book to do something it cannot do. By itself, a book cannot it cannot do these things. It cannot make you rich. It cannot make you famous. It cannot make you successful. It cannot make your business successful. It can't make you feel loved and appreciated. It can't do any of those things. This is really important. Putting too much pressure on the book stifles you in your writing, right? But realistic and achievable objectives help you finish. It's okay. There's nothing wrong with dreaming big, right? But if you are starting where you are now with no book and your dream is, I'm going to be a famous writer and sitting on Oprah's couch, you have no path to get, unless you know the path to get there and it's not magic, then that's not a realistic and achievable objective. I'm not saying it can't happen, right? Like David Goggins has sold 2 million books, worked with us. Okay, so it's possible, but he had a path to get there. And it didn't start with 2 million books. It started way before that. So the more, go ahead and start writing down. We're gonna take about 2 minutes. The more realistic and achievable your objectives are, the easier it will be for you to write. scroll down the next blue section. What's the single book event you're going to celebrate? We call this a champagne moment. So good examples. When I get my first review from someone I don't know on Amazon, when I get my first client from the book, when I hold the book in my hands and know I'm a published author, all makes perfect sense. Bad examples. When I sell 1 million copies and get on every bestseller list and Oprah wants me on a show. Not only is that not one thing, it's 3 things, but it's also extraordinarily unrealistic, at least for most. I mean, if you're Queen Latifah, this is super realistic. If you're not, I don't know. When my book has an impact on my industry. Okay, so that's not a champagne moment, because how do you define that? A champagne moment should be a very specific, definable thing. If it's when my book has an impact on my industry as measured by me keynoting our industry event, okay, then that makes sense. When my dad tells me he loves me, your dad's got the problem, and your book cannot fix that. I know I gave the example about Doug Brackman, but he didn't write the book and trying in order to get his dad to love him and tell him he was proud of him, right? That's something that your dad's got to work on. All right, so right now, go ahead, write down what your champagne moment is, and then I'll tell you why we do this. There's a reason. Now look at what your champagne moment is. It should hopefully be aligned with at least one of your top 2 objectives, right? Or one of your 3. So for example, if your number 1 objective is, I want to generate incoming business for my company, then your champagne moment ideally should be when we sign our first client because of the book, right? Or if one of your big objectives is, I want to prove to myself that I can write a book and learn everything that comes with it, then one of your champagne moments could be when I hold the book in my hand, right? The champagne moment should be a representative moment of one of your major objectives. If you let's say all 3 of your objectives are very business related, and then your champagne moment is like when I get my first review from someone I don't know and they say the book changed their life, then you need to look at your objectives, because clearly impact and growth and legacy matter to you, which is okay. But if all of your objectives are business related and your champagne moment is not, something's misaligned. Make sense? Excellent. Questions?
Tucker, I've seen a couple of comments in the chat. You might want to come back to the idea of what's a realistic objective, because I'm seeing things like when I see my book in a bookstore in another city, when I see my book in the grocery store, when I'm a bestseller. I think some people may still not quite be grasping what's realistic.
Okay. So let's say your champagne moment is when my book's a bestseller. So that means you're going to finish your book. It's going to come out. Let's say it does well, right? So if you don't have a platform, like most people, then selling 2,000 copies in your first year is really good. So let's say your book sells 2,000 copies. You got, let's say, maybe 50 reviews on Amazon. That, you're averaging like 4.7 stars. The book's really impactful, right? But your book hasn't hit a bestseller list. So fuck it. It's a total failure. Is that what you're saying? That makes no fucking sense at all. Like that is the definition of putting too much pressure on your book, right? You're telling yourself this thing, that the champagne moment for you, the moment that you're going to get a bottle of champagne and celebrate with your partner or significant other, is only when it hits the New York Times bestseller list, not before. That all these other landmarks and benchmarks that you hit don't matter. That's bullshit. Like either you aren't understanding it correctly, or you're putting too much pressure on yourself as a defense so that you don't finish the book. Like, my job here is not to blow smoke up your ass or feed you bullshit lies. It's to help you understand the process so you can finish, right? And that type of thinking, I don't mean, and I'm not shaming anyone. You're not bad for thinking that, right? Like, if that happens, cool, right? Like, I want every single book of mine to sell millions of copies and be bestseller, right? But that's never my champagne moment, ever. I think the best book I've ever written is the best book I think I've ever written got the least amount of attention, the least sales, and was not a bestseller. I'm still proud of the book. I still think it's amazing. My champagne moment was not that sort of external validation, right? That's number one. Number two is your book's not going to be, we're defining bestseller by New York Times, Wall Street Journal, USA Today. It's just not going to do that unless you have a platform of people waiting to buy it. So if you have 10, and I don't just mean like, I think there's a lot of people who would like this book. I don't doubt that. That might be true. But if you don't have tens of thousands of people who know your name, who are waiting with a credit card to buy it, you aren't hitting a bestseller list. That's just not how it works. We've got all kinds of pieces about this in the course and on the blog. That's just not, it's not realistic. Not going to happen. And it doesn't mean anything bad about you or your book. It's just not, that's like me saying, I'm 6 feet tall and white. I got small hands and I'm an average athlete. So like if my goal is to play point guard in the NBA, and I'm 44 now, if my goal is to play point guard in the NBA, that's not realistic. Not going to happen. It wasn't even realistic when I was 18 and I could ball for, you know, my physical limitations. I was an okay basketball player. Not going to happen. It's not realistic. Right. Same thing. And I'm saying this is like, I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not telling any of you it's not going to happen. We've put dozens of authors on these lists. It's possible. But all of those authors had platforms and spent a lot of money for marketing and promotion. So if you don't have both of those things, it's very, very difficult. Not impossible, just very difficult. And it is way too much pressure on yourself to say, that's the only thing I'm going to celebrate.
So Tucker, someone has a follow-up here for you, which you might want to address, which if what you said is just true, which we know it is, how did you become a bestseller since you weren't known?
It's an excellent question because my website went up in 2002. My book came out in 2006. I spent 4 years writing, and I was not writing in a cave alone. I had my stuff up on the internet for free, and I was collecting email addresses. So when my book launched in January of 2006, it got exactly zero media attention, none. But I had 50 or 70,000 people who had signed up to get my stories in their email. And 10,000 of them approximately bought my book in the first 2 weeks, which is why my book, as a debut author, debuted in the New York Times bestseller list out of nowhere. And then it fell off because all my fans bought the book. So I sold, 15, 20,000 copies over the first 2 months. And that was pretty much 98% to my fans, right? But then, and so it fell off, and sales, like the first week, the sales were like 6,000 or 5,500. And then it went down, 38, and then 27, and then 1,800. And then they went down. They bottomed at like 900 in a week. That was about 9 months later. And then they started climbing. And then all of a sudden the book went back on the bestseller list in May of 2007, and it stayed on until 2012. 6 consecutive calendar years, right? The reason is because the book was fucking great. And I mean, I define great as it had the exact right message at the right time for a group of people that no one else was talking to. I wish I could sit here and tell you that I'm a complete uber hyper genius and I orchestrated this. That's not true. That's not how it ever works. What I was someone who was pretty smart. I saw an opportunity. I worked my ass off at it, and it happened to be the right opportunity at the right time. So luck, hard work, timing, and luck is a big reason why. And if I could sell that, I would be worth way more money than I am now. And I probably wouldn't sell it. I would just use it for myself and nobody else. Like the book I'm most proud of has sold like 25,000 copies in its history, or 50,000 copies, which for me is not good, right? So I would have used my magic pixie dust on that book. There's no way to know, to orchestrate that ahead of time. You got to build an audience. So if you want to go spend 4 years building an audience, cool. I would recommend using your book to build an audience, though. It's one of the best ways to do it. Anything else?
No, that's all we got right now.
I hope I didn't scare anyone off. I'm not trying to shame or hurt your feelings or whatever, or crush your dreams. Like, if any of any of the extreme stuff happens, like it all happened to Goggins, right? Goggins was like, he had been 3, 4, 5 years doing media and all this other stuff. And so like the book was the first thing he'd ever asked his fans to buy. And so we sold 200,000 copies in the first month, right? And so like that's why it worked so well for him so quickly too. Look, I have seen it happen hundreds of times where a book comes. Cheryl Strayad's a really good example. Her book Wild came out. It did okay, no bestseller list, nothing, and then it's a great book. And word of mouth, and it grew and grew and grew, and now it's fucking everywhere. You can't get away from it, right? You could absolutely write one of those books. Totally, 100%. Absolutely. And I will show you how to write the best possible book you can write. There's no formula for creating a great book, because that is the right message delivered the right way at the right time. And if I knew that formula for sure for books, I would use it for myself or sell it for millions. All I can do is give you a really good framework that has worked for a lot of people, right? And so you got to fill in the rest. Make sense?
And the Cheryl Strayed example, she didn't gain popularity off her book. She gained popularity through her blog and through writing as Dear Sugar. So just in all the examples that you spoke about where the book is a piece of the architecture of creating success, it is for professional writers too.
This is why I hammered it. This is why I hammered it home. Listen to me, all of you. This is why I hammered this home. If you measure book success by book sales, you are going to be miserable. That is not that is the worst measure of success. If you know, don't get me wrong, if you sell a lot of books, cash your checks. That's cool. That's like a bonus, right? But like, if that's the measure, I'm not saying you can't do it, but then it's like, you're going to be miserable. I know those people. It's not fun. All right, let's go to the next stage.